Well, here we are. Hopefully, a little less chaotic than last week with me tap dancing around trying to kill time while Andy was racing home from work here. But we have lots of stuff to talk about today. UFL. We'll get TV ratings tomorrow. We'll talk attendance. And Andy, we have breaking news to talk about as well. Andy, coming off a Dodgers shutout win, or excuse me, the Padres shutout win of the Dodgers here. But you still have a rant today, so this should be good. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'd rather just rant about that because that was really fun. I got to go to my first Petco game this year. The weather was immaculate. Attendance record for the Padres as a 3-game series in their history of Petco Park. It was really fun. It was great to always beat a rival, but had a great weekend. How about you, sir?
It was good. Yeah, I saw the attendance from the Padres game, and I said, for context, that's like 6 Memphises. So I didn't want to tweet that out, but I just no, but baseball's around. But no, we will talk about all of that today. We'll talk about attendance. Andy has promised me a rant. People are saying hi in the chat here. We'll talk through the games. We got some playoff stuff that's sealed here. The USFL conference a little sleepy here, maybe the last couple weeks. Workshopping, a fun show this week. I think this is the last week of my weird work schedule, so this might not be what everyone wants coming up Friday, but I'm trying to get CFL stuff on here, and then we'll have a long form XFL interview. But it's the best and the worst of everything. I got paid more today to drive to run a Zoom call than this podcast will probably generate all year. So we got to just contextualize here. But breaking news here. I was setting up. I saw this. This was exciting. So I guess let's get the original tweet here, and then I have the article. Potential here for UFL games coming in for Fridays here, coming up on Fox. Deadline reporting today. Fox kind of unveiled their upfronts, and I had seen this coming already, that they were generally they kind of wait to do some of this stuff for the advertisers, but they were going to unveil their whole slate today because I don't know if revenue's down or they're trying to appeal to all of this stuff. But coming out, we all know that SmackDown's moving to USA, and then WWE Raw's going to Netflix here, I think next year. I can't remember the timeline of that, but they're talking about using UFL content to fill some holes on Friday night. Andy, excitement. What do you think?
So I guess we're just going with Friday Night Football. We're just going to go ahead and move on with that. And you know what? We've seen that from other leagues. Obviously, the CFL famously does that. Obviously, they put Friday Night Football on TV. I wonder what that's going to look like as far as presentation goes. I'm sure. I mean, not just in terms of graphics, but in terms of, do they have other bells and whistles that go with that Friday Night Football presentation package? So for me, I mean, sure, it's worth trying. I'm sure there's been much ballyhoo about the ratings and what's going to affect the ratings and how is it going to go about. So far, the ratings have been pretty solid this year, and even better year over year compared to both the XFL and USFL last year, and really the last 2 years. As far as this goes, I am curious to see how many people will tune in on a Friday night. Obviously, most people in this country are tuned to Friday Night Football being high school, but that's not until the fall. So in this case, do you start to put other kinds of show reels, or do you start to put in other like documentary footage? Like, what other kind of content are we talking about here? Because the schedule is already set. The game schedule is already obviously set in stone from what we have, unless they are thinking about flexing a game, which would be really interesting. I'm not sure if that's what necessarily it
Well,
entails.
there's some confusion here, and yeah, I like that. When I was in Bakersfield, we did FFX. It was Friday Football Extra, and we got to go and shoot. That tells you what kind of time frame of the lifespan that we were in when we were using the X for that. But so this would be presumably in 2025, right? And so there's been a lot of hoopla about, okay, are we extending? Are we doing another season next year? I've been getting DMs this week about like strife and stuff. I don't really know. I haven't had time to deal with all that stuff, but presuming we go into next year, we had the comment here from, and I thought this kind of said it good here. You'd have college football in the fall, college basketball games once college football ends, and then the UFL would start up right as college basketball ends. So you would, if we were to expand, if we were to expand next year to have 10 teams, then you could do a Friday game. You could do, the 2 Saturday and the 2 Sunday games, kind of spread it out that way. Philip saying here 12. Yeah, whatever. But it would give you another time slot of that. And it's a really good time slot. I mean, SmackDown has kind of made that destination. Now, do you attract a lot of casual viewers in that time slot? Not necessarily. And I remember back when I was really into WWE stuff, there was a lot of debate about that, right? Like, it's not great, because presumably casual people are out on a Friday night. They're not sitting there flipping through the TV, but you're getting the diehards that are staying there. But if you build this up and make it be a thing, I think it would be cool. It at least seems that Fox is bullish enough to include it kind of in their, it kind of in their press release here. Deadline had the article about all this stuff. So thoughts on that? Having the expansion. We might do some expansion talk on Friday as well. But thoughts on that and kind of allowing more spots to do this.
People always want to have expansion talk, right? But for me, I guess the thing I think about is the distribution as far as who's broadcasting the games, right? Sometimes it's not always an even split. I've noticed that at times, 2 times it'll be ESPN and 2 times it'll be Fox, but there's some weekends where it's 3 times ESPN and 1 time Fox. So now you can distribute it a little bit differently, where maybe it could be 3 times ESPN, 2 times Fox, or even 3 times Fox and 2 times ESPN. So kind of playing around with the different channels. What do you put down as far as where do you want to distribute that game? Do you start prioritizing certain games? Do you say, hey, we're going to have flex scheduling? Because that's the other thing. It hasn't really happened. It doesn't really come into play yet in spring leagues, at least not that we've seen much of, a little bit, but maybe seeing more flex games as far as, well, this seems like a really important matchup. Maybe we should put this into an enviable time slot if possible, or swap this out with another game. Then you start, I guess it doesn't really matter in terms of travel schedules because everybody's playing in the same and practicing in the same hub and then flying out. So in that regard, it doesn't really affect it too much. That's something to be discussed later, but I think it's worth a try. I am curious to see, like you said, if there's going to be casual viewership outside of that, that's going to stick, because it's probably just going to be diehards for the most part, especially if it's Thursday or Friday night. Casual viewers are not really looking to watch things on Friday night. Like you said, everybody's trying to get out and trying to enjoy their lives or do something with their family or something of that nature. We'll see. And then, does that affect attendance? Does that affect people who want to do something on a Friday night who are in the area? Is that going to affect something as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've had a lot of comments here about, do we do regional games on this slot? Experiment around with that. Do we not have to do regional games anymore? Because like this year we had the double ups on that. But yeah, and so just I have it highlighted here, kind of this, and this is kind of what they're showing for the year, at least in terms of the Friday slot, is how I read it. Like we're not playing UFL replays like in September, whatever, right? We're gonna air things as they're timely for that. But it is interesting because it's the same thing with some of like this NFL Network stuff. And I know we've had the Arena Football League, everything going on, and that's a whole separate issue. But like, now that we're post draft, like what is NFL Network airing right now? Like, I don't know. Right. And, and I watch Good Morning Football, and that's even cut right now. And I think they're bringing it back in the fall, but like, there's a wealth of this. It's just a weird time where if you're not in kind of the golf game, you're not in the hockey game, you really kind of need something to broadcast here. Basketball's, that's its own thing. So I think it's cool. Like I said, WWE's kind of made this be a spotlight on Fridays. I definitely think it's cool, and it helps add to this kind of like expansion talk, because as Mike Mitchell has said repeatedly on the podcast, 10 was an idea going in to talk to the government here before the merger. Canton was really on the table. So then you do Canton, and then you do, Oakland or something. I think that would be kind of smart, but anyway, any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I love the idea of expansion. We have yet to see it for any of the leagues that have been around so far. Mostly we've been downsizing, not, upgrading. So for me, I would love to see it, of course. I think it's possible if you have another time slot, but you need to do the research on the markets. You really do. And I want them to do their thorough research on these markets before they go and jump into them. Obviously, we've talked about them doing a lot on their own markets, of course. I want them to make sure that they're careful about which ones they're going to. But, more games, I'm happy to watch. I'm happy to see more people get a chance. Maybe bring back some of the teams that got stiff-armed, Do you go back to Tampa Bay, that's lost the Bandits and the Vipers in the last 5 years? Do you go back to a market like, I don't know, if you want to go back to LA, if you want to try that. But again, I know they're trying to cost cut too. So it's dependent on where they're going as well. What kind of TV attention are they trying to get? Like you said, with the regional markets, you have to think carefully about what region are you trying to appeal to now. And as you and I have both noted numerous times, there's no West Coast market here. So do you finally start to get the West Coast involved in this iteration of the league? I would love to see more games. I just would have to be confident in saying that, yes, next year they would have 10 teams. But for now, I still want them to worry about the 8 teams that they have right now.
Yeah, I just want there to be, and like I said, we'll have probably a deep dive about this Friday, just because we'll talk. I want to preview the games a little bit on here as well, and have a little bit more time for that. For the Friday episode, I just want any thought at all put into these markets, right? And we've talked ad nauseum about this, and like, well, these are the trademarks we had, and these were the leftover cities, and this is where we had stadium deals, and this is where the hub is, and this is where like. I just want any thought process at all into like, this is a really strong market. We have, we know we have a good venue here. We know we have local interest. We know, they're starving for that. We can see the regional viewership. We know that, what is it always like Ohio's or, it's not, it's whatever. Like there's certain markets that are always like the non-NFL or non-UFL markets that always like rank really high on that, like Columbus or whatever. Mike's always got all the different stuff on there, but I just wish there was any thought process at all than just like, well, we have the Wildcats trademark from LA, and well, we were in Tampa before, so it's going to be the Tampa Wild. Okay, there we go. Like any sort of thought process would be cool.
Yeah, just relying on the trademarks has not really seemed to pan out all that much, which we'll get more into later in terms of the attendance numbers. But you have to put in the work if you expect those trademarks to work. Obviously, there's two different angles that we've had: the XFL and the USFL. The XFL was more grassroots. Hey, these are new brands. We're going to try and up the ante on these new brands. That worked for some and it didn't work for others. USFL, same way. In terms of some worked, some didn't, but more so from them, it was, well, these brands are already established. People have nostalgia for these brands. Some people do, but I don't think most of their viewership does, to be quite honest. I think it's all brand new people. You have to kind of find a way to appeal yourself to the new audience, which there's plenty of. There's plenty of new people like us and other people who weren't around in the 80s that obviously like the teams and like the brands, but you can't just rely on nostalgia. You have to be able to put in work for them and not just be reverent about them, because there's not really a lot of familiarity with that history other than maybe a few players that people know went to the NFL. So if they're going to continue doing this, they do have to pitch it. I don't know if they have to necessarily pitch it as a new thing, but maybe just, I would say, reimagine it. That's what I would say. Reimagine what the brands are. Reimagine what the Showboats are. Reimagine what the Panthers are. Reimagine what the Stallions are, or whoever you bring back into the fold. You want to bring back the Express. You want to bring back, if you want to bring back the Bandits or whoever, reimagine it. That's my biggest take there.
Yeah, we did the episode a couple weeks ago. It's the UFL or USFL carried this way. Like, I'm pretty convinced that it sans Birmingham, which is credited with 3 years, which is good, and we'll get to attendance, but credited with 3 years now of being in that market and having more fan support than some of the other ones. The USFL nostalgia, I do not think was worth this squeeze, and we tracked all of this stuff with the Michael Cohens of it all and the trademarks and the lawsuits and all that stuff. Like, I think if you had invested the last 3 years in building your own trade, I think you'd be the exact same you are, if not further ahead, and not relying on like, what is the Memphis Showboats? Oh, the USFL back. Like, I know Pat's in the chat. I know he likes to track the stats back, and like this, the modern USFL and all that. Like, I think it's not a zero number. Obviously, there's people that, but I think that the juice was not worth the squeeze on that. And seeing how this has all panned out this season, I'm pretty confident about that.
Yeah, no, like I said, the brand identity is maybe not as strong as they expected it to when they bought those IPs originally. They expected a lot of people to sort of jump back on board. And look, there were players that were reverent about it, and that it came back. Of course there were. Unfortunately, they couldn't celebrate that the first season because there were still a lot of trademark issues. Last year, obviously, they put a lot more work into being more reverent about those brands. And again, that was great. But I don't know. You just haven't had things like being able to trot somebody like, not being able to trot somebody out there like Jim Kelly when you had the Gamblers brand. You said, hey, you remember when he played for the Gamblers? Wasn't that cool? We really haven't seen that. We haven't seen people be able to be advertised in the same way.
But also, is that cool? I mean, I get it. Like, I totally get it in the historian of it. I'm not. That just not like nothing for me. I don't know. I mean, I track Chad, and I know all this. I track Chad Kelly because of everything going on with the Argos and everything else. Like, not because he's the nephew. Like, I don't. That doesn't. It's hard for me to make that connection. I don't know. That's just where I'm at.
I understand. I guess for me, like, would it be such a bad idea to have like, if like say if if the real Gamblers were still around, if you still had the Gamblers around and they were playing in the Houston market, for example,
the real Gamblers,
the real Gamblers. If you had the actual Houston Gamblers playing in the Houston market, and you said, "Hey, we're gonna fly Jim Kelly down here, and we're gonna have Jim Kelly bobblehead nights." Like, I think that would be kind of cool. I don't know if it would like draw all of the people, but it would be something. I think a really good point that was made on your show last week. You have to remind me of the gentleman's name that was on.
Tom Mirko. Yeah, if you guys
Tom,
and if you've missed that, like it did fine. I mean, the episode did fine. If you haven't checked out with Tom Mirko last week, the former AFL team president and COO, I thought it was a great interview. Just talking about just someone 30,000-foot view. This is what I would do. This is what I would try. Knowing enough to know what's going on, but not living in it every second like we do. I think it's very valuable to get that outside perspective because I do think we live in kind of this echo chamber.
Yeah, well, I think he was bang on about the giveaway thing. I really do, because he was right about, especially with MLB baseball, they always give away stuff, right? There's always free stuff that people can get, and that's a draw. I mean, people come out. I bought a San Diego Padres Hawaiian shirt separately because I didn't make the game, because I loved the shirt so much, and I was like, I couldn't make that game, but I want that shirt, and I found it secondhand from a third-party supplier, and I bought it. That's how badly I wanted it. And so I absolutely think there's value to that. And I think that's something that these leagues have to lean more into. I know, obviously, we made light of the whole spatula thing with the Memphis Showboats, but lean into it. But also don't devalue your own tickets sales. Of course, value what your product is worth, but then also have bells and whistles attached to that too, and say, hey, look, here's what you get if you come to the game.
I'm going to read a couple comments here, and then I want to get into your rant and everything here because I'm going to make sure we're talking that for the games. I will say, so yesterday at the Mariners game, so we do like a crossbody bag. It's like the tiny enough it fits in, and I have one from last year because they did, first 20,000 last year, whatever. It was a Mariner one, but then they did one yesterday that's like the Sunday cream color that we wear, and it was a Mother's Day exclusive, so it was mothers only, 21 and over, because it was sponsored by like the casino, so it has to be. Andy, I stole one for myself. I waited until their backs were turned, and I grabbed one and I walked away. Because I was gonna buy it on eBay. I was already like, look, because we were in line to go in, and I was already okay. I didn't even listen to it. I stole it red-handed, and I walked away. And I don't feel bad at all for it, Andy. But I did. I've never stolen anything in my life, and my heart was racing. I literally just ran up the stairs.
I hope you're okay with having that on your conscience, sir.
It's fine. It's a good bag. A couple comments here. We're just talking expansion. Like I said, more about this on Friday's show. Just stay tuned for that. Scott, Portland, I think you get one or the other. I don't think you can do both. And I know that we do the MLS, everything with the Timberwolves and the Sounders. Seattle didn't show out great. This is a Seattle guy. Seattle didn't show out great last time. I would not double do that. It's not like people, I wouldn't say like Portland people would travel up. Like, it's not out of the realm. It's a pretty far trek. I mean, everyone thinks that it's like, oh, it's the I-5. It's pretty far. I got to go to Portland for work here in a couple weeks. But anyway, all of that, because Philip's talking about bring Seattle, New Orleans. I know that New Orleans is working on the stadium. We have another comment about that as well. Jared, surprised Denver hasn't been picked, talking about they have a good market there that works. And then this is just interesting. I wanted to talk football bench here. And this is a Reed issue too. Getting harder and harder for me to get a chance to see these games. Time hanging out with family. That is the one thing I don't like about the later start. It's May now. We got Mother's Day, the championship games on Father's Day. People are out doing stuff. You're at the Dodgers games. I'm in the mirror. Like, there's things going on now where you're not competing with that. I know the TV market is tougher in terms of like March Madness and all of that, but you're not fighting with that. Like, let's go outside and do any of that other stuff. Let's show attendance here. And then Andy's got, his rant. I'm very excited here. So Mike Mitchell here over the weekend, Arlington. I don't believe this attendance. This was paid. So like, I think we're getting to the point here of sparsity where these aren't butts in seats or turnstiles. These are like people that bought season tickets, did not choose to go to the game, right? Forfeited that. I got a lot of comments because I tweeted out, like, it's 70 degrees. It's beautiful in Arlington. The Renegades are going to be, the Rangers were playing out of town, getting swept by the Rockies. Like, what is the excuse? And everyone's like, well, they're 0-6. They suck. Why would anyone go? We were season ticket holders to the Kraken. We went to every game through the end of the season, even after we were playoff contention eliminated, because we're fans of the team. Also, I'm going to be in Arlington at the game whenever it is, Memorial Day weekend, because we're going into town for something else. And I'm like, we might as well go to the XFL game, or the UFL game, because it's something fun to do. It's, let's kill 3 hours during the day and then we can still go do whatever, So like, I just hate this. Like, well, the team sucks. Why would anyone want to go? Like, people go to crappy teams all the time. I mean, we went to the Mariners games all last year after we were like, oh, we're losing streak. We're not going to get in the playoffs. And then we miss it. Like, people go to the teams if they're fans of the team. Birmingham, 14,000. I saw a lot of people saying that was going to be like 20,000, approaching St. Louis numbers. DC again, this was paid, not there, 12,000. And then Houston with the 6 on that. Thoughts on that? No, let's go, Andy.
Yeah, look, I find it really fascinating that these numbers were so contestedly debated this entire weekend. And all because our guy, Mike Mitchell, decided to put out these numbers that people decided to debate them. I found that really fascinating. Look, the numbers are the numbers. They come from the venues and from the sources themselves. If you have a problem with those numbers, then talk to the venues, talk to the league, talk to them. Like, you think that just because these numbers are being relayed, by the way, by multiple people, not just Mike himself, multiple people have relayed this number that is literally announced in the stadium. And there are also pictures of these numbers being posted up on the video boards that show them in plain sight. I mean, Reed, there are people this weekend that I looked at and I realized, do you think 2 + 2 = 5? Like, I started to wonder about some of these people in terms of their ability to really receive this information and be okay with it, because a lot of people weren't. And, that's on them, because they need to understand that this is how it is. This is what the numbers are. And this is what they're going to be for the foreseeable future and for the season. As far as the Birmingham goes, did I expect 20,000? No, I did not. Did I expect a decent number? Yes, because this was a marquee matchup. This was the best matchup of the entire season. You can debate how many people were in the stands that were, St. Louis fans. I'm sure if Battlehawks people will say, well, we made up half the attendance. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah,
I really don't. I don't believe that.
Brett was there. He runs the Facebook. He's a Birmingham guy. He said it wasn't that. Like hundreds, but it wasn't like over. But that's just what I heard. Again, I caught the lot. We'll get into the game, but I caught part of it. But yeah, I heard it wasn't overwhelming.
For me, I just think it's the number you were going to expect. And now, and of course, there are people that are coming out and saying, well, that number can't be true. There's got to be more than that. Then were they invisible? You tell me where they were, because that's what was reported. That's the number that was relayed. So I don't know what to tell you. You think there were more people than that? Do you think the ticket counters aren't taking those away? And it doesn't go the other way too. You can't look at another, like DC. People were debating, well, there's not that many people in DC. There can't possibly be that many people in DC. You know what? Watching on TV, maybe not. But guess what? It's called paid attendance. And that's the number that was shown. And those are the people that paid for the tickets. You can debate whether or not that many people really showed up. That's the number that was shown. So it's not going to be any more than that. And it's definitely, it could be less than that, depending on if those people actually show up or stay at certain points when you watch the game. So, like, I just don't understand people taking numbers and just almost debating it with a wall, in terms of just saying, I can't believe this. This can't be true. It is true. And you have to face that reality. That's what it is. And that's the same with Houston. It's especially the same with Arlington. I mean, Arlington doesn't shock us because, let's be frank, they're not a good team, and they haven't been a good team. And you really want to walk into a stadium and say, yeah, I can't wait to support an 0-6 team today. I just really don't understand people's inability to comprehend these numbers. I really don't.
Let's see here. Just a couple comments. Robert wants to talk football. We get this the same pace every week. We do TV attendance, and we have the breaking news today. We'll get to football here. We'll talk through all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
First, I don't know if I've seen Robert on here before, but this is kind of, I got my list here, so we go through the list. And then they say yes, the devoted fan base of the people don't go to crappy teams. This isn't the majors, Reed. Well, I mean, if they, I don't know. I talk about all that stuff, but yes, maybe the league could do a better job marketing all that stuff. And then, let's end it here. I can't even see myself. DeMarcus, I'm a season ticket holder. Renegades for marketing. There's nothing on the stadium to let people know they're playing there. We're going to let people. I agree with that. I stand by that. Andy, anything else, or are you ready to talk football?
I mean, look, I just think that's a huge part of it, right? It's the brand identity, and that's the thing that has to be part of this. You have to know what exists and what doesn't. I mean, that was the case with the last couple of years when, if I had something USFL related or XFL related that I was wearing, somebody would confuse those leagues all the time. I would, people are getting mad about this, but I would talk to someone about the USFL and they'd be like, isn't that the one The Rock owns? No, that's the XFL. Actually, the USFL is owned by Fox. Oh, okay. Look, casual people don't know that. So yeah, that kind of brand identity doesn't exist. The last thing I'm just going to say here before we move on, and look, I get it. I get a lot of comments about Andrew. You're too negative. You don't have anything positive to say about anything, right? You don't want to be. You just want to be negative. No, I'm being objective because I want things to be better because I expect better. And if my expectations aren't the same as your expectations, let's hash that out because my expectations are that numbers should be better on the attendance and there should be more attention that's given to this product because it is a good product. I love watching this football. I think the Birmingham Stallions and the St. Louis Battlehawks game was fantastic. I loved it. It was a great game. I said it in the chat as much. I wish more people were there to see it live. And it disappoints me that there's not more people. Half the stadium is full and the other half is blocked off for various reasons. Like I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And one other thing I'll say, I saw a comment, I know that you read about somebody saying, well, the parking situation's terrible here at Protective Stadium. We can't park here. Well, then, okay, first of all, I wrote a whole article about this 2 years ago about the infrastructural issues around Birmingham, and people were upset with me, and I get it because you think that I was coming after the Birmingham. I wasn't. I was pointing out something that was perhaps affecting the ability for there to be attendance numbers for the average viewer. And if I see something like that and someone mentions that, then if it's a problem at UAB games, at University of Alabama Birmingham games in the fall, then it's going to be a problem for Birmingham Stallion games. And that's something that has to be addressed. There's a mitigating the problem with this picture, Reed, is that there's mitigating factors across the board for multiple reasons why there's something here. But when we keep getting people who have excuses about why these things aren't transpiring a certain way, that's when I get a little annoyed because I think it's people who want a certain reality that's not there. Okay. And it's people who don't see what they want to see.
Yeah. The comment about they wanted more people at the USFL game, but the parking lot, I'm like, this is a 45,000 capacity stadium. Like, what are we talking about here with like, it's one of those, and I don't like to get, last comment from me, because I want to get to the standings here. Yeah, I get a lot of like, because I was anti-XFL when the CFL stuff was going on, and I said the season was going to start on time, and I was anti-USFL. Like, I've been the same the entire time on here. It's like this, and people like read it. It's like it is like, what do you want, man? Like my wife, it's like my wife knows, like she married me, I married her, we've been together 10 years. Like this is what it is, man. Like you're happy with it, you appreciate it, but it's like what you're waking up with in the morning, what you're going to bed with at night. So, let's talk about this stuff. So this is good, bad, kind of whatever. USFL conference here, Stallions obviously 7-0 on there. Panthers here now. The Stallions, and correct me if I'm wrong, home field like could like if Birmingham lost out and the Panthers won outright, we could swap all that stuff. But USFL, like this is it. We got 2 1-6 teams, and then the two is that. Thoughts here because we have week 8, week 9, week 10, 3 weeks left on here. What do you make of that? Just because for the USFL side, then we'll get to the XFL, but it's pretty locked up here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, lost cases for the Memphis and Houston. They're both just listless franchises right now. They don't have much going on for them, and they mathematically really don't. This here means that they're pretty much out of it. And for Michigan and for Birmingham, I mean, this is such an easy clinch. Really, what it comes down to is Michigan will play Birmingham again down at the end of the season, but they probably will not be fighting for the 1 seed. I surmise that Birmingham will, at that point, be looking at an undefeated season. And you have to debate whether or not the question becomes how many people are they going to rest? That's really Birmingham's biggest question now is how many people can we get away with resting while we're still trying to win games? And we've seen that they have quite the arsenal. So, I mean, for the USFL, it's disappointing. Houston was just such a rough transition into Rice Stadium, taking their players with them from the Gamblers and it not really panning out. Obviously, Memphis, I mean, they're the worst team offensively and defensively in the league. They're putrid. They got absolutely railroaded by Arlington, and they don't have any semblance of identity anywhere across the roster. And it's a shame that this has come down to where they're not. There's no competition here with the rest of the USFL. Whereas in the XFL there is, but there's a lot of question marks as far as a lot of these teams. But the USFL, I mean, everything's just kind of locked up. So there's not a lot of intrigue between watching really from the Panthers or the Houston Roughnecks side.
We have a comment here, Jared. I thought the Showboats would be so good. I was wrong big time. Renegades too. Remember when we were doing it was you and I, we were doing like our preview, and it was like the Showboats guy was like, they don't even understand how good the Showboats are going to be. And I put up the meme about the guy in the corner, like, they don't even know. Like, maybe you did know, Andy. Maybe you called the Showboats being hot garbage. Like, because I remember we were having this conversation. Abdul wants to know: do you think CJ and Flip survived the season? I want to talk about Flip because, like, is this a John DeFilippo issue? Because he's invested in it. Is it the players? Like, because I like him and his passion in the league, or is he part of the problem?
No, I think this was just poor roster construction, and he got shortchanged. Obviously, not being able to stay with the Breakers. It's kind of unfortunate that he got flipped over to the Showboats. This was obviously Todd Haley's baby last year, the last 2 years, and it just didn't really pan out for Flip. I think it's unfortunate. I'm not going to pull the plug on him yet because I think he needs a chance to have a better roster because this offensive line is terrible. You can't protect anybody. Their defense is just a wet paper towel. Like, they can't stop anybody. They have to reconstruct this entire roster. I think this is more of a player personnel issue than it is a coaching issue. I think John DeFilippo is fine. I have no issue with him. Curtis Johnson, I mean, he's had 2 cracks at this and it's not worked out. And I think he's probably going to be quietly ushered out the door here pretty soon, especially with how this Roughnecks season is going. And they might be. And also, again, if this league is adamant about advertising in the Houston area, maybe they try to find another Houston legend. If Wade Phillips isn't going to be there, maybe they can find somebody else to coach there because I think they want to appeal to that market. They can't continue to have these numbers at Rice Stadium, or perhaps they get everybody back in the renovated Houston Stadium and it's fine. But they got to find a way to reconnect with that community, and maybe that means a coaching change.
Let's go here. Any other general thoughts about the XFL conference, and then we'll get to the Memphis Showboats here. Obviously Battlehawks taking here 1 and 2 with the Brahmas. Defender, like any other just general thoughts on this? Because I feel like there's a little bit more up in the air. Maybe there's not because the Defenders here. I think someone was calling for an upset here coming up this weekend if they're playing. But I don't know. What do you make of the XFL conference? Yeah, DC at St. Louis. It could be interesting. Early game, 9 a.m. Pacific on Sunday.
I mean, the Battlehawks already enacted their revenge. I'm sure they would love to just end the hopes and dreams of the DC Defenders right then and there. DC's just not the same team as it was last year. Mike Mitchell was dead on calling them a 500 team this season, and he was right. This team just lacks the same tenacity that it did, especially on offense. The running game is just not the same. As far as Arlington goes, I mean, sure, they're technically still in it, but it's kind of like, actually, no. As of now, they're not in it, excuse me, because obviously the Brahmas winning eliminates them. But that's, they were a team that was just unlucky, and a team that just couldn't win close games. And I think they're better than what their record shows. I really believe that. Now, their special teams are still bad, but they were able to do enough offensively on Saturday to kind of show, look, they had weapons, they had ability to do something. They just couldn't punch it in. As far as the Brahmas go, their biggest problem is who's going to be under center, because they've been having quarterback issues, and that can sink a team if they're not careful. But I think they've accumulated enough wins, and that head-to-head against DC did hurt them, but I think they are going to be ahead enough that they're going to be able to pull this out going down the stretch. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in DC. So for me, I still think it's going to be 1-2 at the end of the season with St. Louis winning the conference.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Let's get in here. So I watched a lot. This was a good. Well, it's really got out of hand here. I was watching this Saturday morning here. Renegades get their first victory. Just a just a shellacking of the Showboats here. Stoops and company finally get all that. What are your thoughts? Arlington finally got one, kind of for pride at this point. They were right. They were still in contention at the point where they won, and then obviously they lost that. But thoughts on that?
I mean, just an absolute clinic by that offense. My goodness. Davion Smith having a revival game. Luis Perez looked great. I mean, his downfield passing was so crisp, especially to Jared Payton. I love seeing their offense rolls. It could have been like this the entire season. And again, I don't think their offense was the problem this year. I really don't. They just had so many lapses on defense and special teams gaffes and penalties that it cost them games. For Memphis, this is I mean it's par for the course for them this year, really. I mean their defense just looks so lackluster. They have no sense of identity on defense. Offensively, they're going back and forth. You're throwing in Case Cookis, you're throwing in Troy Williams, you're trying to see what sticks. Nothing really sticks. They're creating turnovers. They can't really seem to run the ball effectively enough at times because their offensive line again has a lot of issues. They don't have the pieces. I know there was a lot of individually talented players like Jonathan Adams and Darius Victor and a Case Cookis. And like you looked at the playmakers, sure, but the fundamentals of this team are just broken and they just didn't have it as far as any way of controlling a game. They always seem like they're playing catch up every time they play somebody. The Arlington Renegades were just completely out for blood. Like they were. They were out for blood. They were out to prove everybody wrong. And they did, at least for an afternoon. We'll see if they can do it again, but it's unfortunate that Arlington is the defending champions in trying to continue this enthusiasm with their crowd, their home crowd that they've been trying to build just wasn't really coming to fruition this year because they just weren't good enough. And it's a shame because they caught fire so hard at the end of last season and now it's just really up in smoke for them. And so again, are we starting to count down the last days of Bob Stoops, who, by the way, I will say got his 200th career victory. Congratulations to him. In between his tenure at Oklahoma and with Arlington, that's fantastic. I love that for him. He's just been a stalwart of this game for so long, but we'll see if he continues on with this franchise going forward or if he says that, that's good enough.
Yeah, I was joking because I think Pat had shared it too. And I said, like, yeah, I'm sure he probably felt like finally took long enough. It only took 7 weeks into the season to get all that. Memphis going into Michigan next week. I was trying to look ahead here on the schedule. Do you think Memphis reacts to any sort of revenge here? Michigan clinching at this point. What do you make of this here, the early game next Saturday?
You want it to be competitive. I don't know how competitive it is. I do think this Michigan team is really hitting their stride now. I mean, Danny Etling's actually been playing pretty well. I got to give him credit. We'll get more into that game later. But for Memphis, I don't see them really enacting revenge here. I think it's going to be another lackluster performance from them. I don't think they really have much juice left to begin to continue the season. As far as the Renegades go, yeah. Are you going to be able to enact any revenge on the Brahmas? You know what? I give them a puncher's chance. I would look at that really hard. They might have a chance to upset San Antonio. If they're going to continue having quarterback issues, I think there's a real chance Arlington could win that game and play spoiler. They just haven't, again, really been able to do much offensively, but I give them a chance next week to really see if they can pull this out against San Antonio. I mean, I trust their offense a lot more right now than I do San Antonio. So you might want to look at that as far as upset bits going into next week.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, San Antonio's got to keep pace here, so I think that they have a lot to play for as well in terms of kind of running the XFL conference. Let's get into my tabs got all screwed up. Here we go. Of course. And then I clicked the wrong button here. I have it, I swear. The game of the year. The Battlehawks here going into Birmingham against the Stallions. I caught a lot because I remember I had a memorial filming and like the second the game started, got done early, watched the last quarter, caught the highlights going through and the muff punts and block punts and all this kind of stuff. It came down to it. AJ McCarron injured, trying to get down the field. The kind of I don't know. What do you say? Did he kind of crap the bed here? Missed opportunity. They had a chance. They had a chance to win. What do you make of this game? And did it live up to the hype?
Oh, absolutely. It lived up to the hype. I mean, great back and forth action the entire afternoon. I love that it was played in the daytime. Actually, at first I had mentioned that I wanted to be at nighttime for a rating sake, but actually as a daytime game, it was pretty entertaining. I love seeing both of these teams in the sunlight. For AJ McCarron, he fought his ass off. I know he definitely thought he was going to be able to play through this whole game injuryless, and he got twisted up on his ankle. I remember at one point during the audio, we heard the game audio, and it sounded like he said, "Oh, did I break my ankle?" And you're thinking, "Oh no," because that may have just sunk the Battlehawks' chances for the year as far as winning any sort of title. But he comes back in; he seems to be fine. Hakeem Butler is a man possessed. They're trying to get the ball to him as much as they can. Great game from Jacob Sailors. My goodness. 3 touchdowns from him. Just an absolute fantastic game from him. For Birmingham, I mean, Adrian Martinez, what can you say about this guy? He has been absolutely fantastic out of the pocket, avoiding defenders, just using his pure speed to get away from guys. I mean, there were times where he was behind the line of scrimmage. It would be a long situation, maybe a second and long or a third and long, and he would just run away from these defenders and just run up field and be able to get extra yardage. Really, his abilities are on full display in this league, and he now has 10 touchdown passes in the last 3 weeks. He's the league's leading rusher as a quarterback. I mean, he really is putting on an absolutely outstanding profile. And honestly, I know a few weeks ago I said he hasn't played enough games. He hasn't had enough snaps to really be considered in the MVP conversation. McCarron's your front runner. Well, he has the head-to-head win now, and if he keeps playing, he just very may win it. I mean, I think is starting to qualify for that award based on just in the short amount of time he's played. He has just been so spectacular. It really comes down to how many more snaps does he get and AJ McCarron gets, depending on who clinches early and who's able to kind of rest their starters. It may ultimately come down to numbers for both of them. AJ still putting up good numbers, of course. He did have that interception, but you still have good numbers from both of these quarterbacks. So the MVP award is going to come down to who plays the most down the last 3 weeks of the season.
I think Pat had posted today they're kind of taking AJ day by day. The other quarterbacks are getting some opportunities on that. What do you think they do here? Because they're let me get back up. Where is my everything? Because they're defenders coming in. I don't, it could be a really competitive game here. So what do you make of what would you do for the Battlehawks?
That's a tricky situation. They had this situation last year when AJ had to sit out, and they started Nick Tiano against the Vegas Vipers.
And he did the cat. Remember, he ran into the touchdown and did the helicopter thing. I remember that.
He did the helicopter spin, and they won in overtime. It was, I believe, it was the first overtime ever in XFL history, and they finally were able to get that special overtime play through where they got the 3 conversions. It was really cool to watch, but this. I mean, for me, this was a case where you wanted to see the defenders and the Battlehawks at full speed and full health against each other. So not having AJ, I think, complicates things. Can they still win at home? Sure. I think they can rely on their defense. I mean, they still have an excellent pass rush that I think they can rely on. I just don't know if they're going to be able to score as much as they really want to, but DC is not been very efficient offensively, so I wouldn't be afraid about that aspect for them. So for the Battlehawks, you could start Manny Wilkins. We'll see what happens. Obviously you want AJ in there, but I think they still could win that game regardless.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the standings and everything, I have too many freaking tabs open here. I mean, a lot would have to go right for the defenders here in terms of moving forward. I don't know I don't know what the defenders kind of do here. Do you go all in? I don't know. What would you do for the defenders?
Oh, if I'm the defenders, I'm running the ball all game. That's what I'm doing. I'm running it down the Battlehawks' throats, and I'm going to continue doing so. I don't think they really need to rely on their passing game, which has been okay this year. I think they got to find a way to run the ball, and they got to run north-south. They can't be dilly-dallying around or trying to do all these horizontal plays. I think they got to just run north and south, and I think they got to do that as much as possible if they want to have a chance to win on this weekend, but they have to be able to control the clock. That's really the biggest thing.
Yeah, foosball fan here said I'd be kind of hyped for a silver star, and I said, "Is it time? Is it time to see Brandon Silvers?" I don't know. I think he's a pretty inactive QB3. If I'm not reading anything incorrectly, you think I'm right there?
It seems to me like that's the case on the depth chart, but again, maybe he impresses the most in practice this week and he gets the start. But I think they really like Manny Wilkins, so that will probably be more likely outcome of this scenario.
Anything else on St. Louis, Birmingham? Like I said, a lot of hype on this, and we got we had the attendance and people poo pooing all that stuff. I mean, it was good. It was a really good. But I don't know. I think there's this weird, and just to get back into non-football for a second, there's this weird dynamic of like, well, the Birmingham Stallions are the best team ever, which they're really, really, really good, and like that means like everything else that goes along with USFL versus XFL or whatever, like, well, it's clearly the XFL is like that's like I'm the most skilled technical painter in the world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like I am the greatest artist or the way that I do. Like it's just a weird disconnect of like, no, the Birmingham Stallions are phenomenal, but also there's other things that aren't great about this or that. Like it's not A or B. It's not black or white. There's shades of gray here, but like the Stallions are awesome. Like this is going to be a great game for the championship game. I think having this game now makes the championship, which we assume, right, going to be even more entertaining. Any other thoughts on that or anything else about the game?
Listen, Stallions fans can go ahead and live in their little candy land there. That's fine, but they have to realize that just because their team is great doesn't discount what other teams are doing. So I understand that sentiment, but look, the Stallions have to worry about themselves in their own franchise. Okay, they got to worry about their own team. Don't focus on the other teams because what they've been doing the last 3 years has been fantastic, and I think it's a tremendous accomplishment. But I don't think they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you know what? Birmingham fans don't like me anyways, so I can say that. But I just think that they need to calm down a little bit before they anoint themselves. They win three now. Look, if they win 3 years in a row, fantastic. Go celebrate, do whatever you want. But they haven't gotten to that point yet. Let's wait until the end of the season and then we'll talk.
I think it's gonna be pretty. I mean, again, I don't have a horse in any of this race. I mean, I like the Brahmas, but I think that this is it's a lot of bragging rights. Like if you're the 3-time Stallions, like it's a ton of bragging. Like it's almost to the point of like annoyance, right? With like, like if you're like Chiefs fans or whatever, like it's getting to that point of like, the dynasty. But I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's good for the league. I just wish storyline wise, like, we've had like the kicker things this year, right? We've had kind of Arlington's collapse, and then we've had like it just doesn't feel like there's been 8 different storylines going on this year. It feels like it's like the Stallions are killing everybody. XFL is a little more competitive in that conference, right? Am I missing like just in terms of like major storylines this year?
As far as it's going, yes. Outside of all the the non-football related things, as far as play on the field, yes, that's pretty much what's going on here. The XFL has been very competitive, and they've been sort of taking bites out of each other. Whereas the USFL, it's pretty clear hierarchy of who's the top and who's not, and that's seemed to be the case the last 2 years as well. There always seemed to be a clear favorite as to who were the best teams in the USFL and who were not.
Let's get over here. DC, Michigan, DC losing again at home here, back to back, right, with the Battlehawks last week. I don't know. DC has not had, injuries and stuff ahead of the season and everything. Panthers coming in, take care of business. What did you make of this game?
I thought this was a dominating effort by Michigan. They just ran the ball right down DC's throats, and they did an excellent job of continuing to pound the rock with guys like Matthew Colburn had an excellent game. West Hills, all of them. I mean, this is the kind of game that DC wishes they could play, but they can't play it this year. They just don't have the horses for this. They just don't. Michigan was able to contain themselves. Again, Danny Etling not doing much through the air, but again, he doesn't really have to. With a running attack like this, he really doesn't have to do that much. Their defense without Frank Ginda didn't seem to affect them too much. DC just really couldn't get any momentum whatsoever on offense. Again, the crowd may be a little more sparse than usual, and just that energy was kind of lacking. DC has lost 2 home games this year now, and that's significant. You go into that game against the Battlehawks, and you're 10-0 all time, and now you've lost 2 out of your last 3. It's kind of a new era for DC. It's an unfamiliar feeling for these DC fans. They're not as formidable at home as they thought they were. So I think that's a big point going forward. Again, Tom was trying to do his best, but he's getting bum rushed in the pocket. He can't really make just any sort of spectacular throws to help save this team. But again, I don't think this is really all on him. I think this is just more of there's just a lot of lacking in the offense, and defensively, again, they just kind of get bullied at the point of attack. So for Michigan, I think it's encouraging that they've shown who they are. Again, it's a consistent team. This is a team that knows who they are, and they don't fake it in any way, shape, or form. And I know who they are. So I like having a team that I can watch that has an identity like the Michigan Panthers.
I'm just seeing there. I'm starring a couple comments we'll get to at the end here. Yeah, I don't know. DC, let's get rid of that. DC, all that stuff. Michigan looking good here, right? I mean, in terms of the standings as well. You're going to be in a playoff spot here. I mean, what do you make? Stallions, Panthers at this point? Is it even a contest? I mean, are they just happy to be second place?
I think you're happy just to get into the dance, which the Panthers have done for the second straight year now. Last year was a surprise that they got in at the very end. This year, they clearly have all their ducks in a row, and they have a good team. I think they're going to clearly be the 2 seed because I just do not see the Stallions dropping enough games for them to catch up to them. But for the Panthers, I mean, you have to start thinking about long-term, what's your plan to face a team like Birmingham, which, again, they only lost by 7 to Birmingham. So they played them tough last time. Now, of course, again, they had Ginda in there, but they could try and see if they can keep it to be a really sloppy game. What they want to do is they want to make the game ugly against Birmingham. But also, they weren't facing Adrian Martinez full-time. They were facing a lot of Matt Corral. So that also changes the equation a little bit. And they did give up a lot of yards. But we'll see what happens with this game and what happens going forward. For Michigan, though, they should feel pretty safe and feel pretty comfortable with where they're at. Maybe start looking a little bit ahead to Birmingham.
Yeah, like I said, we talked about here, Michigan hosting the Showboats on here, DC going into St. Louis. I don't know. I'll be curious in terms of like TV ratings and stuff. And obviously we'll get the things with Mike tomorrow about this weekend. I think it might be a little bit of a low, except for the USFL, the Birmingham game, just because of the stakes of that. But the other 3 games weren't on the best in terms of network slots. I guess I just I was going to make this point earlier. There was been a lot of talk of like, do we flex games later on if there's no stakes and all this stuff? Like, I don't know. I mean, last year we moved up a couple of the XFL games, like up or back an hour. I know one of the Seattle games they did that because I was going to go to that game, but like, I don't know if they're really sitting there like, well, the last game of the season doesn't really going to have any stakes. Like, I'll just be curious if they do that or not. I think it would certainly help attendance or TV interest, but like, I don't know. You've sold it. Like, you're already having trouble selling tickets. Can you move? So do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think it's an interesting thought exercise. I just don't know if it's practical.
I mean, again, if they can, then if they think it's really going to affect the attendance ratings, sure, or the TV ratings. But I don't know if that's going to make any significant impact this season. Next season, when you start doing the schedule making, maybe you can keep that as a conscious thought. But this year, I don't know. I don't know if it really adversely affects it one way or another, to be honest. Again, I prefer the evening time slots for Saturday. I think those are great. Having space between the day game and the evening game, I think is great. Obviously, the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs are still going on. So there's not going to be much movement there as far as moving the games around. So for them, it would be better if they could start experimenting after those seasons, but their season is going to be over before that happens. So I suppose for the time being, it is what it is. You're going to keep it locked in as it is. And I don't know if it really changes much going forward, unless there's like some significant schedule change and there's some event that's going head to head that is going to adversely affect your ratings.
We had a question here. M. Ryder. We'll get to that at the end. Let's get through the last game, and then we're going to talk through all that. Chris, NBA is on life support. I think NBA is doing all right.
I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think so? Life support? They had the in-season tournament. Didn't do it. Didn't do it.
They're doing just fine. Their attendance ratings were just fine this year. So yeah. I don't think so, Chris.
Let's go here. Last one here. Brahmas eking out the win. I had a text from Max the second that the field goal kick went through. Like, destroying misses that kick wide right. Like, I don't know if this Brahmas, are we going? Are we seeing a shootout here with all that? Brahmas eking out the win. We talked to tenants earlier with the Roughnecks. We've talked to Chris Johnson and everything else. Any new thoughts on the Brahmas here?
I mean, Dormady finally fell back to earth, and he was horribly inconsistent. Kevin Hogan having to come in and finish the rest of this game. I mean, it's a concern for the Brahmas now because now you have a carousel at quarterback, and Garbers is not coming back anytime soon. So now what do? I guess they lean into Kevin Hogan, but I know that's not their plan A as far as running their offense. Kind of, unfortunately, the same thing sort of plaguing this offense as it was the Houston Roughnecks last year with AJ Smith and this entire staff. It's kind of starting to slow. Now, I don't know if you have injuries to other players like you did last year with John Trey Kirkland. He's obviously still playing this year, but it's just not the consistency you would hope for on this offense. It's just really not really working out for them. So it's unfortunate. I just think that this Brahma team was able to take advantage of a pretty hapless offense for the Houston Roughnecks, who also could not hold the lead. They were up 12-3, and you gave up a touchdown on a 3-point conversion. And then you give the ball right back to the Brahmas. They go down, they kick that field goal, and they win. So, again, that's also a gaffe by the Houston Roughnecks, but it took that gaffe in order for them to be able to win this game. So the Brahmas, I mean, you're not going to beat St. Louis this way. That's for sure. You are absolutely not going to be the St. Louis team with this kind of offense. You have to figure something out, but is that going to be with Kevin Hogan? It's going to have to be probably, because Dormady really just looked lost out there on Sunday.
Yeah, it is the issue. Again, we get a lot of comments to Dormady of it all, and I, saw a lot of you guys' comments in the chat as well. Like, I mean, what do you attribute that to?
I guess for me, it's kind of like, I suppose that obviously his biggest thing is his downfield accuracy. He really loves to push the ball downfield, but there are some times where his intermediate routes get kind of haywire, and he doesn't really have the same kind of accuracy that a Garbers does. And I said that a couple weeks ago. He loves to push the ball downfield, which it supplies more of a threat with a vertical threat, but they don't really have the same consistency in their short to intermediate game as they did earlier in the season. And without that sort of ability to sort of calm yourself, just move the chains, get something going, because Houston's maybe playing a too deep shell or can't really allow anything over the top. Without that ability to kind of pull yourself in and be able to make those short throws, then you expose yourself as a quarterback. And unfortunately, Dormady has had that issue in the past, and he has it right now. And because of that, there just wasn't any fireworks to be had. So Kevin Hogan will definitely do that for you. He will make those short throws. Will he push the ball downfield? Probably not, but he will make the short throws. He'll make the easy throws, and maybe that's all this offense really needs. So it's unfortunate. I always like Dormady in terms of his ability to play on his aggressive traits a little bit more, but in this game it didn't come to fruition, and he had a really bad pick in this game. He just didn't really look really comfortable at all at any point.
There's a conversation going on in the chat. Chris, sorry, we're talking, and I'm listening to you as well. I'm reading all this stuff. Chris, here you go. Just spell it down by NBA, 76 billion TV rights deal, say in the future for live sports. Okay. He's like we're having just having freakouts here with all this stuff. Sorry, Andy. I just had to put that. I see this spiraling out of control here. I don't know. I mean, the Brahmas, which were the Roughnecks, really exciting to watch last season. Does it feel that way now? Do you put any of that weight on AJ Smith? Is it Wade Phillips? Kind of anything else with the Brahmas here before we round this out?
Like I said, there's been times where I think other defenses start to figure out what AJ Smith is about as an offensive coordinator. I think he's a brilliant mind. He has a lot of good points to him. I do think there's maybe some tells in the way he runs his offense. And, again, it's consistency with his quarterback. Some quarterbacks love getting talked up in their ear up until the snap. Other quarterbacks don't, like Brandon Silvers was fine with that. Cole McDonald potentially was not. Chase Garbers was fine with that. Maybe Quentin Dormady isn't. So it really depends on what quarterback he has and if they're okay with his coaching style. And I'm not saying it's wrong either way. Like I really like AJ Smith. I think he has a lot of fantastic ideas for running offense. I just wonder if his cohesion with the roster really always is able to mesh correctly. But there's a lot of thought process into how he runs his offense, but it may lead to some confusion for some of the players that are involved with it.
Anything else here? We think we got through, like I said, TV attendance will be coming out tomorrow. We will be tweeting all that stuff up. Like I said, probably some expansion talk here, workshopping, which UFL teams on the chopping block, thinking about that, or maybe moving team. I'm working chopping. There's a whole process here, Andy, workshopping theses for that. Like I said, if you haven't seen Tom Murkow's interview from last week, I thought that was really good. Really appreciated him taking an hour to kind of sit down and talk through that. I had one last question here I wanted to make sure we got to that I starred, but anything else from you, Andy, from any of the teams? Anything else here before we get to this last question?
Like I said, I wish we could get Battlehawks Stallions every week. I mean, that was an amazing game. And especially, the one thing I didn't get into was the Stallions were lucky because they had that punt blocked. And St. Louis had a prime opportunity to go down the field and get a touchdown. But for some reason, AJ McCarron decided to run with the ball and not get, and he didn't get a first down, and the clock didn't stop because they didn't have a timeout. I didn't understand that at all. That sort of mismanagement was sort of baffling from St. Louis. It really is really a shame that we didn't get to really see a greater ending to that, because that game was fantastic. That game was amazing. I wish we could have that every week. But other than that, I mean, you kind of know who your teams are. It's going to be the Brahmas, most likely. It's going to be the Battlehawks, and it's going to be the Panthers, and it's going to be the Stallions. So your Final Four is pretty much set. You still have 3 weeks to play here, so we got to figure out some other things here. But look, quality football continues to be really good. I harp on that, and I hope that becomes more of what it's about. And I really want to focus on that going forward. Of course, there's other things we need to focus on too in terms of the longevity of the league, but I do want to focus on how fun it has been watching these games.
No, it's been great. The last we had a question here was because people are asking about markets and stuff. Like I said, we'll talk through all that. That'll be deep dive Friday. That'll be good. We were talking about, did I lose it here? Maybe I lost it. Oh, here we go. What do you think of the mistakes so far, rebranding, mistakes? Because we're talking about the quality of football is great. I don't know if it's even anything to do with the rebranding or staying separate leagues. I just think that the fundamental philosophy of all of these leagues is we put football on TV, people watch. We put football in stands, people go to games. And that's not what it could be anything. And that's why when we had the Todd on last week and everyone's like, what does the AFL know about all this? You're selling an entertainment product. You're selling a sports product. It was the same thing when Josh Harris, who owns the Commanders, they brought in the guys from the NBA to help. And then people are like, well, what is the NBA? They know about marketing a product. Yeah, you're not going to take every idea, word for word and translate it across, but you need to talk to people that know how to do this. And selling arena football or selling Pokemon cards on the street or something, it's all of the brand awareness and marketing. And so it just kills me in some of this stuff. But any thoughts on that, Andy, before we get out of here?
Yeah, there needs to be a strategy going forward. And I think it can't just be the cut and dry strategy of here's football, see football, watch football. There's got to be more to it, because let's face it, this league is not. Unfortunately, I don't think this league treats itself as a major league. I wish it did, but I don't think it does. And I think they should operate as such. If they want to be big time, they got to act big time. And that requires a unique strategy, and that requires taking themselves seriously. And sometimes I feel like they don't do that. I really don't. So for me, they got to continue reprocessing this and moving this forward if they're going to be able to create a new strategy going into the next season. I don't think things can stay status quo. They really can't. I really believe that. And I have a lot of ideas about that too, which I may get into at some point in the future. But I just don't think what's going as far as their standard right now, I don't think that's going to be enough. I want everybody to survive. I want, look, do I want 20 million teams to be thriving? Yeah, of course I do. That'd be awesome. But we have to be realistic about these expectations. We have to be realistic about what's going to come about from these leagues. And look, I want what's better for these teams, because I want these players, these coaches to have opportunities. I want there to be people who enjoy this product, and I want there to be longevity in this league. But that also means aiming the bar high and taking risks. And I know that's scary, but that's part of the process.
Yeah, Scott here. No, Scott, no one's getting rid of. So now we're getting rid of Birmingham. We're talking about dropping Birmingham in the chat. We've really spiraled here. Gregory, I hope you mean you take these other people seriously. Because, yeah, I think it's, and that's like why, again, we all this negativity. I'm like, no, I think this can work. I think this is what it should have been all along. Fox and ABC and everything working together, and we've got the right people involved. And in terms of like the football side, I do think the marketing, like I thought about that today where we had that Mark Thompson story come out where he's like, was selling the merchandise and it wasn't. And then they went to the local news and said that they weren't getting the merchandise. And like, they got a, comment from the league. And I'm sure the league was like, why are we dealing with this? But it's like, like, you're still at that, like you want to get to that point. And I've said this before, conversations back going into last year with the XFL and like, well, we're a top, 6 brand and selling tickets. And it's like, you're not yet. You can get to that point, but I think this can work. And that's why we are critical about it. We are negative about it because this is the last time you're going to see this for a long time. We've already seen what's going on with the AFL without solid, ownership and leadership involved. We have that here. There are other things that need to be good. The football is great. That is one piece. It's a large piece of the pie, but that is not the only part of the pie. And until that everything else steps up to that, you're going to have issues and you're going to have comments from at least me. So if no one else.
Yeah. And that's, to point out is people say, well, I take it seriously. I take it seriously too. And that's my thing about it. I don't want the league to take that for granted or be conceited about it because fanship is fickle. It's something that it can be loyal, but you don't want to ride that loyalty into the ground. You can't do that. You have to be able to reward the faith and loyalty that you get from your clients and from your customers and from your people who love your game and love your teams. Like you can't, I just don't, I don't think you can just expect it to come back every single year in, multiply twofold or threefold every time around. You got to make sure that you understand your audience and you are able to reward your audience. And I think that way it'll make a stronger relationship and not just, treating it like it's going to come back around every single time or feel like, oh, we have to deal with these people. We don't want that feeling, right? You don't want to be treated that way. You want to be treated with respect and you want it to be a mutually beneficial relationship for all parties involved. That's what I feel.
Yeah, Chris here says, great show, read and guess. This is not a guess. This is the face of the UFL, Andy Murray. So we got to make sure about that. And then last comment here, Gregory just said, this is in terms of the Birmingham game. That was a great football game. We probably could have distinctly reviewed the game that way, but we wanted to get a little more context. I appreciate it. Like I said, as always, Andy coming on. Like I said, kind of football. I want to do a little bit more football here. And then we had complaints at the top. We got to all that stuff because we're probably going to be a little bit more talking expansion and stuff this week. We'll do my best CFL work schedule last time for me here, and then we'll probably get some more of that here, and we'll all be rolling into, we'll be doing the kickoff show and all that stuff, and we'll get the Hussies of the world and everybody, and Evan Wilsmore is on if he can do it and everything else. But if you're still here, like and subscribe. We're like, what are we at? Like, we're so close, but we're so far. 3,500 subscribers. It saves me money. If you don't want me to spend the money to buy the ticket, we're 37 away from getting 2 lucky winners, get tickets to the UFL championship game. And so, like and subscribe, get us over the hump there. Andy would appreciate it. I would appreciate it. And then we can give away something else. I have a lot of other stuff to give away. We just have never gotten to you got to get to the first giveaway to the other. Andy, I appreciate anything else and we'll get out of here.
No, Reed, thank you as always. And gosh, CFL season's already around the corner. It just sneaks up on you, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, we hear training camp. I would recommend 3 Down for in-depth stuff like that. We got the same comments when we were at the Grey Cup last year. I'm in Seattle. We do what we can remotely. I got to rely on a lot of those reporters coming on. So, I would certainly follow the people that are doing firsthand knowledge and stuff like that as well. But I'll give 3 Down. They're doing tremendous work. 3 Down, but like, what am I doing Elks training camp? Like, I'll do my best. Let's get through this week and I'll get some more CFL people on. We'll see you guys next time. And thanks.